So CONCACAF W is done. And one of the things that I was curious about was the idea of spots, rankings. Right? In CONCACAF, everyone's asking who's the best team in CONCACAF, who's the third best team, who's the whatever. We're all looking for crowns and titles to hold. You know, Canadians got a lot of flax for saying we were CONCACAF champions for finishing at the top of the table, and everyone else in CONCACAF's like, you qualify for the World Cup. Relax, bro. On the women's side, I think one of the more fascinating things for me was seeing what was going to happen in the third place. The U.S. If I look at CONCACAF women's football, there's the U.S. in a tier of their own. They're number one in the world for a reason. Okay, there's a gap. Then you have Canada. On their good day, they could steal a result from the U.S. And then underneath Canada, there's an open chair. And underneath that open chair, there's a gap. There's still a gap between Canada and the open chair. But underneath that open chair, there's a gap. And then there's a group of teams. Now, heading into CONCACAF W, I was wondering who that team might be. And honestly, I had put my thoughts on. If I was hedging any bets, I was hedging towards Mexico. Mexico had two good results against Canada in December of last year. They beat them 2-1 and then drew 0-0. They hadn't lost any matchups in a long period of time, playing well, and they were the hosts. Right? So I thought maybe this is where Mexico supplants themselves. They take the crown and establish themselves as the third best women's team in the region. They did not. Stunned by Jamaica in their first game, blitzed with speed by Haiti in the second game, and then a spirited effort, but no result, losing 1-0. They did not score a goal at home. That prompted a lot of firings in the FMF. So, yeah. So it's not Mexico, but then it's not Mexico. But I'll get to what I'm saying. Costa Rica, on the other hand, has been just kind of quietly building a nice, solid program. They've had good players. Costa Rica and Jamaica have low-key my two favorite goalkeepers, women's outside of Canada. I just like how they played. I watched the Costa Rican keeper against Jamaica, and she was just outstanding in that game. It was a friendly, and she was just outstanding. Just saving, but then eventually got injured and had to leave, but she was outstanding. And I've said it many times. Did I mention she was outstanding? But Costa Rica has a lot of good players, but as a unit, I felt that they were definitely the team that could maybe work better than with the sum of its parts and get results and go. And they're headed to another World Cup. But I don't think they've established themselves as the third best team. We had Jamaica. Now, Jamaica was an interesting conversation. Qualified for the first World Cup in 2019. Had a lot of emerging players coming up. Then their coach was let go due to allegations of sexual abuse that was happening in Canada soccer at the time and his connection/involvement with that. They hire another coach, and the federation hires a coach who is so good that the players essentially from day one say, nah, we're good. We don't want this. And then have a new coach come in and have to come in and really essentially play counterattacking football in the tournament and get to the third place spot. And now in this tournament, they go and they beat Mexico, they beat Haiti, which we'll get to, and they beat Costa Rica. So, I mean, those are teams who are in that group of teams, right? That clump of teams that we look and say, yeah, that's that middle class, someone hasn't emerged to take the crown. So are they the third best team? I don't think so. I wouldn't say it. And then there is Haiti. Now, if you've been under a rock, Haiti's been under turmoil and in turmoil for some time now. whether it's not fully recovering from the earthquakes that happened back in 2011 and 12, whether it's not quite recovering from the fact that their president was assassinated a few months ago, whether not talking about the fact that there's violence and just turmoil in the streets, that team has underperformed at the youth level. And it's been a little bit shocking, disappointing, but entering this tournament, I had a lot of Haitians telling me about some of their players. When I watched U20s and they were like, yeah, well, this player isn't there. They kept on saying Duvernay. I was like, okay. Then we watched them in qualifiers. They were scoring goals for the sake of scoring goals, which was interesting. But that's always a formula for a team that can either just shock the world or they can burn out quickly and then they'll be done. And they really came in from one result. I mean, they played a good game, but again, were countered and played right into what Jamaica was trying to do. And they lost. They beat Mexico. They gave the US more trouble than we thought they would. But then against Jamaica, they couldn't bear their chances, and Jamaica did. And 4-0 later, Jamaica's walking away, automatically qualified to the World Cup. So that's the group of 4 that I'm looking at. And while Jamaica has finished third in Concacaf W, I'm not ready to crown them as third best in Concacaf. Because again, in a tournament, you get these results. But when teams can come in and really go for you, I want to see that. And I think over this next year, that's going to be one of the more fascinating conversations to have. Which team emerges from that group of 4 to take their seat at the table of the top 3 in CONCACAF? I don't think the US is going anywhere anytime soon. Canada may be on a slight decline, but the gap between second and that empty chair, I still think is great enough. And we saw that in CONCACAF W, where Canada essentially just dominated the game against Jamaica. Now, granted, Jamaica had their coach for a few months, so maybe with more time, they're able to get some better flow and some better strategies and better game shape for them. But that's also time that Canada will have to prepare. Costa Rica, definitely a good defensive team and always overlooked. They don't have as many big names as we would be talking about. You know, they have Rocky Rodriguez. They have, who's that midfielder? I'm forgetting that midfielder's name. Oh, it's gonna. You know, they have Viviane Chinchilla. They have Priscilla Chinchilla. They have Carolina Venegas. They have good players, and just honestly, players that sometimes don't get the credit that they deserve for how well they play. They definitely are one post away from either having a draw against Jamaica or winning, and that's a tough result to get, but that's what they got. But players like Catherine Alvarado, Kristen Granados, those are players who aren't household names, but they are definitely players who are elevating their play as well as the play of their team coming through, right? You have a team like that. You have Haiti with Chata Borgella Louis. You have Duvernay, that's the name that everyone's buzzing about. You have Judy, players like that. On the Jamaican side, you have Trudy Carter, Drew Spence, Kiki Van Zaten, the big name, Kadisha Bunny Shaw, right? You have names like that. And then Mexico, again, a unit, but you're still missing some of those names. And the names that they come to really perform, names like Stephanie Mayor, names like Diana Garcia. Like, you're not seeing all those players come through and play. Yes, I said 2 random names, but I mean, Mayor is a name that we all mostly know. But the question comes down to whether it's like a Marissa, whether it's a Maria Sanchez, whether it's a Jocelyn Montea, Diana Ordonez, like, they need more production And I think as those names develop, that will really create an interesting conversation in terms of who is able to claim that number 3 spot in CONCACAF. Looking at the squads that they brought up here, Haiti is definitely the youngest squad looking. A lot of their players early coming in. Mexico had a nice blend of youth and veterans. But, I mean, if you look at their youth teams, there's definitely names that can come through. At the same time, that development isn't linear, nor is it guaranteed for success. So, within that, that's something to keep in mind in terms of players. When it comes to Jamaica, the same thing on the men as they'll have on the women's. How are they able to develop, and also how are they going to be able to recruit? Jamaica has duels from the US, from Canada, from England. But how well can they bring it in? I mean, as I'm recording this, Twitter is blowing up over the fact that they're stranded in Houston because they don't have money to load and bring their things. Their federation will be their undoing. So that is also something that we can't not take into consideration. Mexico definitely has the backing of growing league. Jamaica is more on their own. Haiti has a turmoil at home, and Costa Rica has been slowly building. But I'm curious to see kind of which one of these 4 teams is really able to take a hold of that third best team in CONCACAF and really solidify themselves as players to be reckoned with, and players to really look and say, we belong at the table. We may not be able to eat from the same plate, but we belong at the table with you.